This is a rounded reading selection taken from Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. And typically, I like to make sure I get all the way through a book and have a little bit of time to reflect on it before I do one of these. But it's going to be a while before I get through any of these books, and this one was something that was so specifically pointed to my work that I know I want, like, even if the rest of it turned out to be complete antithesis of the things I value, this paragraph is a standalone almost. The book, The Hero's Journey, is kind of a dialogue back and forth, and it was written after there was an interview of Jung that became a video documentary of what he had as the hero's journey. So part of it is questions from the interviewer, and then part of it is Jung's responses. What I'm reading today is part of one of Jung's responses. So I'm on page 48, and he is discussing the work of the artist Thomas Mann. And I haven't went and looked up his work. I'm really looking forward to it. But they're talking about the function of the personal mythos and how Thomas Mann was using the personal mythos. So this is third paragraph starting on page 48, and I'll be going into page 50. Now the trick for the artist is to present his material so that it doesn't put a ring around itself and stand there as separate from you, the observer. And that you get when you see an artwork that really hits you. I am that. I am the radiance and energy that is talking to me through this painting. In purely empirical terms, it is called participation, but it is more than that. It is identification. Now what man tried to do when he turned to mythology was to reinterpret Genesis in terms of the elementary ideas that are implicit in the ethnic ideas of the Bible. It is a very important work, and it's the only way to translate the Judeo-Christian heritage into a heritage for mankind instead of for a certain group. Do you get my point? It's a big one. This is what Mann was working on. This is what Jung is working on. This is what Joyce is working on. This is what everyone is working on who is trying to retain the positive values that are in this heritage, and at the same time move into a global period of life where we don't isolate ourselves and say everybody else is worshiping devils. Now what we must come to find is how the artist, how Joyce, how Mann has broken through and rendered this mystery. One way is through the rhythms of their prose. This is a problem of poetry. The poet is breaking you past the image, breaking you past the words, so that things should point past themselves. Rhythm has a lot to do with this. And then there is an interlude and a portion of a poem. But I want to move on to page 50. And so here is the secret of Mann's art, the absolute ruthless eye which sends the arrow of the correct word to the name, the fault, and on the arrow is an ointment of love. He calls erotic irony. He also calls it plastic irony, and it's the secret to Thomas Mann's art. Now the function of art, and it was Shakespeare who said it, is that art holds up the mirror to nature. Art holds, you might say, a holographic mirror up to nature so that you can see that in this object is the totality, each totality in itself, and this is the way these men deal with their characters. It was Schopenhauer who was the first to bring Oriental terminology into Kantian thinking. There at the beginning of the 19th century, we have this synthesis of the two philosophies. It then became possible for writers like Mann and Joyce to take in the whole enrichment of Oriental understanding of transcendence and the Maya aspect of personality, how it is all an illusion based on the mirror of images of time and space, and render it in purely occidental terms. This notion of what might be called psychological or spiritual morphology informed all these works. Yeats has the same thing in his thinking and writing. At the same time, you have Schopenhauer opening up the whole story of the unconscious, and Freud then coming along and turning it into medical terms. This is a great, great moment. Now, the specific part that I take away from this in my work is this idea of reaching a place where you peel back all of the unnecessary accoutrements of the frame and allow something that is easy to identify with. And Christian iconography in the Orthodox Church and in and out of the Catholic Church will do this by having a really simplified face. And it's really interesting because models do this too. It's a face with no obvious expression. And the fact that they portray saints and Christ and Mary with no obvious expression allows people who are in different frames of minds or having different emotional feelings to project the place they are onto the icon. And then you feel as though the icon can have some sort of empathy with you. And this is exactly what fashion models do. And that's where the whole looks, like, I don't know if I'm doing that well, but the looks without expression, why fashion models aren't wildly smiling or something, typically that's because they're cleaning their face so people can like project themselves onto the idealistic. When I do a lot of my paintings, I will end up with a figure and maybe one or two props and a landscape, and I try to reduce clothing, reduce like just everything, because when it comes to trying to get to a specific feeling like loneliness or elation or fear, all of the other stuff kind of becomes clutter and it gets in the way. Now, I mean, I don't do that 100%, but there's real, like, any additive can just become noise. And so that's something that I think about a lot. Anyway, I was really shocked to find it laid out so clearly in this book, and I'm hoping for more of that, and I'm continuing studying both Campbell and Young this year, and I'm actually trying to be reading The Hero with 1,000 Faces before this book, but that book was in my car today, and my husband is taking our car, so I ended up with this book. I was like, well, I have time, I should read. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll continue posting readings and posting art videos, and continue trying to do the virtual studio once a week. Thanks for viewing.